structures that priests consecrated and guarded behind locked iron doors, structures that monarchs built into the very centers of their capitals, structures that initiates circled in prescribed silence, generation after generation, without ever being told the full reason why. We call it the Black Cube of Saturn, and here is the part that almost nobody seems to want to discuss honestly. This is not a symbol, it is a mechanism, a machine built in stone, worn on the head, and embedded in the skylines of every major civilization on Earth. The names you must never pronounce, the sigils you must never trace, the pacts you must never sign. Welcome. This channel is dedicated to reading what was never meant to be read. Tonight we are doing something different. We are not opening a single forbidden text. We are opening 4 sources from 4 separate centuries and cultures, and we are tracking one object through all of them. The Black Cube. Same geometry, same ritual function, same warnings, surfacing independently, across traditions that never met each other. Now, before we go any further, I want to be precise about what this video is and what it is not. What follows is esoteric tradition and religious history, and it should be read as exactly that. I am not making metaphysical claims. I am not telling you the cube is alive, or conscious, or dangerous in any literal sense. But the same structural warnings do surface, century after century, in sources that had no contact with one another. And some patterns persist for reasons we do not entirely understand. That distinction matters. Hold it as we go. Why does any of this still matter now? Because the primary texts connecting Saturn's geometry to ritual architecture are not freely available. Several are held in restricted collections. The Vatican Apostolic Archive and the Warburg Institute in London both maintain holdings that require formal academic credentials to access. These are not conspiracy claims. That is simply how those institutions operate. If the darker corners of esoteric history fascinate you, subscribe. Every week, we read what was never meant to be read. If you walk into a used bookshop in Los Angeles today, and you know exactly what you are looking for, you can still find a copy of the original 1928 edition. The spine is dark. The pages are heavy. The full title is The Secret Teachings of All Ages, written by Manly Palmer Hall, self-published when Hall was just 27 years old. It is catalogued in the Library of Congress under BF 1411, H3, and it runs to over 200 oversized pages of dense, esoteric scholarship. Hall spent years in private libraries across North America and Europe before writing it. He read primary sources in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Whatever you think of his conclusions, the research behind this book is not casual. Hall was, by any honest account, also a showman. He lectured to sold-out auditoriums. He dressed for effect. He understood that presentation was part of the transmission. Keep that in mind. It matters later. Now, the tradition Hall is drawing from when he arrives at Saturn is old, much older than 1928. The Pythagorean and Neoplatonic schools both treated the planets as principles, not objects. Saturn was not simply a planet in the sky. Saturn was the principle of limit, of form, of time made visible. The tradition tells us that where Jupiter expands and Venus softens, Saturn compresses. It draws the boundary, it ends the cycle. And in the symbolic language Hall is working with, every geometric solid corresponds to a principle. The cube corresponds to Saturn. Here is why. A cube has 6 faces, 6 edges on each face, and the number 6, in this tradition, is Saturn's number. The cube is, by this logic, crystallized Saturnian force. Not a picture of it, not a reminder of it. The form itself, the tradition says, is the compression made physical. Hall writes about this directly, but here is the line that stopped me the first time I read it. He writes, and I quote, "The cube is the most stable of forms and therefore the most binding. To build in the cube is to build in the image of limitation itself." Read that again. The most binding. He is not saying the cube is beautiful or sacred or ancient. He is saying it binds. That is a precise functional claim, not a decorative one. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say the cube represents limitation. It says to build in the cube is to build in the image of limitation itself. The form and the force are, in Hall's framework, the same thing, not the symbol, the thing. Let that sit for a moment. Now, the word Saturn, it comes from the Latin satus, meaning the sown or the planted, the bound thing placed in earth, a name that is itself a description of confinement, something pressed into the ground and held there. The etymology and the geometry point in exactly the same direction. Here is where I want to be careful. Hall was not a credentialed academic. He was a self-educated mystic, working from a tradition that modern historians have every right to scrutinize. The Neoplatonic planetary correspondences he relies on are not empirical claims. They are an inherited symbolic language, and that language has been contested for centuries. Hall himself was later investigated for financial irregularities connected to the Philosophical Research Society he founded in Los Angeles. He was not a saint. He was not a scientist. But what fascinates me about his treatment of the cube is its internal logic. Because Hall is not the only one who arrives here. He is synthesizing a thread that runs from Pythagoras through the medieval Kabbalists, through the Renaissance Neoplatonists, and every node in that chain makes the same structural claim. The cube does not represent Saturn's force. It instantiates it. And the next source we are going to examine is not a book at all. It is a building. One of the most visited structures on Earth, built in the shape of a cube, circled by millions in prescribed silence to this day. The geometry did not stay on the page. Step outside whatever city you are in right now and travel southeast, far southeast, to the Hejaz region of western Saudi Arabia, to the city of Mecca, to the courtyard of the Masjid al-Haram, the Grand Mosque. There, at the center of the largest religious gathering on earth, sits a structure that predates Islam, predates the Prophet, predates almost every institution we think of as ancient. The Kaaba. It stands approximately 15 meters high. It is draped in black, and it is a cube. The pre-Islamic origins of the Kaaba are not disputed by mainstream scholars. Historians including F.E. Peters, in his 1994 work, The Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca and the holy sites, document that the structure was a site of pilgrimage and circumambulation centuries before the 7th century. Peters notes that the Quraysh tribe of Mecca maintained the site as a regional sanctuary, housing multiple devotional objects long before the revelations of Muhammad. The form, the cube, the black draping, the circling was already there. The tradition tells us that embedded in the eastern corner of the Kaaba is the black stone, the Al-Hajar al-Aswad. The legend holds that the stone fell from the sky. Specifically, the tradition continues, it descended from paradise itself, white as milk, and was blackened by the sins of the people who touched it over the centuries. Supposedly, the archangel Gabriel delivered it to Abraham and his son Ishmael when they were constructing the original structure. The pilgrim who completes tawaf, the 7 prescribed counterclockwise circuits of the Kaaba, is said, by the tradition, to have their sins forgiven. But here is the line from classical Islamic cosmological commentary that almost nobody reads carefully. The 11th century Sufi scholar Al-Ghazali, in his Ihya Ulum al-Din, Revival of the Religious Sciences, written around 1095, describes the act of tawaf in terms that go beyond devotion. He writes, "The circling of the heart around the Lord of the house is the reality, and the circling of the body is its shadow." Read that again. Al-Ghazali is not describing worship of a building. He is describing the building as a mechanism for restructuring interior experience. The heart circles the form. The body follows. I want you to notice what he does not say. He does not say the pilgrim chooses this restructuring. He says the body's motion is the shadow of what the heart is already doing, as if the geometry initiates the process and the self complies. Not the symbol, the engine. The word Kaaba itself comes from the Arabic root Kaab, meaning cube, or in some older usages, die, as in the singular of dice, a cube, a die. An object whose faces are all equal, whose orientation in space is arbitrary, whose geometry is complete in every direction simultaneously. That is the root. That is what the word means before it means anything sacred. Now, the skeptic's position here is entirely reasonable and worth stating plainly. The Hajj is one of the most profound acts of devotion in human religious life, performed by over 2 million people annually, and the vast majority of those pilgrims are engaged in an act of sincere faith, community, and surrender to God. I am not suggesting otherwise. The sincerity of the pilgrims is not in question here, but what I cannot dismiss is the geometry. The form persists across the pre-Islamic and Islamic periods unchanged. The circling is prescribed, not suggested, not optional, but encoded into the ritual's validity. 7 circuits, counterclockwise, repeated. Whatever the pilgrim intends, the body traces the same pattern that bodies have traced around this cube for over 1,000 years. The tradition does not require the pilgrim to understand the mechanism. for the mechanism to operate. That distinction matters. The cube did not stay in the desert, it moved. It was placed on heads, built into skylines, installed in the lobbies of the most powerful financial institutions on Earth. The geometry did not stay in the sand. Let me take you somewhere you have probably already been: a gymnasium, a football field, an auditorium with folding chairs and parents holding phones. Graduation day. You have seen the flat square caps. You may have worn one. Millions of people have placed this object on the crown of their skull and called it a milestone, a celebration, an ending. Here is what almost nobody discusses honestly about what that object actually is. The mortarboard, as it is formally called, is a flattened cube. Compress a cube along its vertical axis until the top face widens and the sides collapse. You have a mortarboard. The name itself is significant, and we will get to that. But the shape is the first thing to hold. It is not a hat. It is a cube, modified for placement directly on the top of the human skull, at the crown, the point of highest symbolic importance in virtually every esoteric tradition that has ever mapped the human body. The connection between academic regalia and initiatory Freemasonic tradition was traced in detail by John Yarker in his 1879 work, The Arcane Schools, a dense and largely overlooked study of the transmission of esoteric fraternal lineages into institutional Western culture. Yarker, who was a prominent figure in irregular Masonic orders in Britain in the latter half of the 19th century, argued that academic ceremonial dress, the robes, the hood, the cap, preserved the external forms of guild initiation rites long after their original context had been forgotten. The Oxford robes, he argued, were not merely medieval academic tradition, they were the surface of something older. The tradition holds, as Manly P. Hall also described in The Secret Teachings of All Ages, first published in 1928, the Los Angeles edition still held in the original binding at the Philosophical Research Society on Los Feliz Boulevard, that the cubic stone is the symbol of the perfected but imprisoned self. The initiate, the legend continues, receives the mark of the cube at the moment of submission to the institution, not at the moment of mastery, at the moment of submission. Supposedly, the cube placed on the head at initiation encodes the recipient's consciousness within the geometry of Saturn's constraint, the self-perfected, squared off and bounded. Here is the passage from Hall that has sat quietly in that library for nearly a century. In The Secret Teachings, Hall writes, "The perfect ashlar is the soul of the initiated brother, polished and squared." Let that sit for a moment. Polished and squared. Hall is not describing achievement, he is describing a transformation of shape. The self that was rough, unformed, irregular, has been made cubic. I want you to notice what the metaphor demands. The stone does not choose its shape. The stone is cut, not the graduate, the stone, mortarboard. The word itself is the mason's tool. The flat square board held in the left hand, loaded with mortar, used to bind stones into permanent structures. The word entered English in the 16th century directly from the building trade. It is a tool for setting things in place, permanently. The skeptic's case is straightforward and worth acknowledging. Academic regalia developed organically through medieval European university culture, drawing on clerical dress and guild traditions, and the mortarboard's specific form likely evolved from the biretta worn by Catholic clergy. There is no documented conspiracy of Saturn-worshipping architects designing graduation hats. That needs to be said. But what fascinates me is not intent, it is persistence. The form is cubic. It is placed on the head. It is placed there at the precise moment the institution declares the individual complete, certified, approved, the geometry of completion, the geometry of the cube. Worn on the crown, from the crown of the skull, the cube moves outward, into stone, into steel, into the financial skylines of the most powerful cities on Earth. What you build in the body, you eventually build in the world. If you walk to the intersection of Astor Place and Lafayette Street in Lower Manhattan, you will find a sculpture installed in 1967 by the artist Bernard Rosenthal. It is a large black steel cube, approximately 1.8 meters on each side, balanced on one corner, mounted on a pin so that it rotates. It is called Alamo. Most people who walk past it do not know its name. They just see the cube, spinning slowly, black, in the middle of the street. Now look up, HSBC's global headquarters in London, JP Morgan Chase's tower on Park Avenue, the Kaufman Center. The Cube Arts Complex in Birmingham, opened in 2009. The One Black Square Tower in Dubai. Black cube architecture is not a trend. It is a recurring formal choice made by the most capitalized institutions on Earth, across decades, across continents, with a consistency that modernist aesthetics alone does not fully explain. The researcher and author William Henry addressed this pattern directly in his 2010 work, Star Walkers and the Dimension of the Blessed, a study of mythological and architectural symbolism in institutional power structures. Henry, drawing on a range of comparative mythology sources, argued that the placement of cubic forms in financial and governmental centers reflects what he called a control grid, a deliberate anchoring of Saturn's archetypal frequency into urban geography. I want to be precise here. Henry's framework is interpretive, not peer-reviewed historiography, but his documentation of the architectural pattern, the specific buildings, the specific forms, is verifiable. Go look at the buildings. The tradition holds, and this is where esoteric theory becomes genuinely interesting to examine, that placing the cube in a location of high human traffic activates what occultists call an egregore. The legend continues. The collective attention of thousands of people moving past, working inside, or circling an object feeds the form's function. It does not require those people to believe in the process. It does not require their consent. Supposedly, the accumulated focus of human attention is itself the fuel. The cube, by this tradition, does not generate the field, it collects it. Here is the line from the early 20th century occultist Valentin Tomberg, writing in his anonymously published 1967 work, Meditations on the Tarot, a text that circulated in manuscript among European esoteric circles for decades before its publication, that captures the principle most precisely. Tomberg writes, "An egregore grows by the force of the attention directed towards it, regardless of the quality of that attention." I want you to notice what that sentence does not say. It does not say the attention must be reverent. It does not say the attention must be intentional. Regardless of the quality, you can hate the building. You can ignore it. You can photograph it ironically for a social media post. The tradition says it does not matter. Attention is attention, not worship, not belief. Attention. Egregore, from the Greek egregoroi, the watchers. It appears in the Book of Enoch, the pre-canonical Jewish text, to describe beings who do not sleep, who remain perpetually awake and observant. The watchers. An egregore is, etymologically, a thing that watches back. That is not a metaphor I invented. That is what the word means in its oldest recorded usage. The skeptic's position is the obvious one. Architects cite the international style, brutalism, and the influence of Mies van der Rohe's glass and steel minimalism as the lineage for cubic corporate architecture. And that is a real lineage. The aesthetic history is documented and legitimate. I am not dismissing it, but what I cannot explain away is the specificity of the color, the form, and the placement. Black, cubic, public, load-bearing in terms of foot traffic. The pattern is too consistent across too many institutions with too much capital behind their design choices to be purely accidental aesthetic preference. The cube does not need your belief to function. The tradition is explicit on this point. It needs only your presence, your attention, your circles. You have been circling longer than you know. I need to pause here. The word count instructions contain a direct contradiction that makes this script impossible to write correctly. The writing direction for section 7 specifies 150 to 280 words. The word count field says 7 to 10 words. These cannot both be satisfied.